It was basically, one, have you had an agent, which you said no because they're extortionate.
I'm back on track.
And then the other thing was, so in that case, how did you find clients very early in your career?
Well, you know, early in my career, I just went to newspapers and with my cartoons, and then people started coming to me when I became successful. I've never had an agent for my illustrations at all, and it's all kind of happened by what they call serendipity, happening, a happy happening. I happened to be in the right place at the right time. For instance, I went to the Albert Hall I was invited to go to the proms at the Albert Hall, and in the same box as me was Sir Peter Hall, and he said, "Oh, I always wanted to work with you. I'll phone you tomorrow." And I thought, "Oh yeah, I've heard that before," but he did. And then after that, I did about 5 productions with him, including the Magic Flute in Los Angeles and so forth. 5 productions came out of one meeting. I didn't engineer it. I didn't think about it. I didn't know I was going to do it. And then when it came to the Disney thing, when I worked in America in the 1960s, I was illustrating things for Time covers and traveling around doing reportage with people like President Nixon and President Johnson. There were 2 students who were growing up in Chicago, and years later, Ron and John, these 2 students. Can you still hear me? Okay.
Yes, can hear you.
Yeah. Ron and John, these 2 students from Chicago, became big Hollywood directors for Disney, and they had a giant hit with The Little Mermaid. And after that, the next thing they were going to do was Hercules. And they remembered me from those days back in Chicago when I was doing Time covers, and they were kind enough to say they were fans of mine, and would I consider being production designer on a Disney movie. I mean, this sort of thing you can't engineer. It just happened. And so much of my work has been like that. It's happened because, you know. But now, of course, at this point, I am better known, and people come to me, and they know where I am. And with the emails and the websites, I have a website. People come to me on that and ask me questions, and also find me if they want me to do work. So I mean, one of the questions was, I noticed, is it good to have a website? I think it is. If people can find you on a website, they can see what you do, and they might like to choose you.
And what I'll do now is, if I can go back to people for their second question. Randy, do you want to put your one of your second questions?
Yeah, sure, that's fine. My second question is, how important is style?
Well, as I was just saying earlier, your style comes automatically, and it helps, of course, for people to recognize your work. But I wouldn't worry too much about it because it comes automatically. It just does, like your handwriting, as I said earlier, and you just draw things as you want to draw them. That's the thing. Your style will come. And looking at your work, Randy, I think you have a style already. It's very, and those people who know you and who are around you will recognize your work, whatever you do, I'm sure. They'll know it's you. Certainly one artist knows another artist's work. You can always tell it, even if it's slightly strange. And I'm sure all of you who've worked in art schools, could recognize your fellow pupils' work. It's a style just comes. Don't fret about it.
Okay, thank you.
Fiona, would you like to put a second question, any of your questions, to Gerald?
Yes. Gerald, what's your opinion on recent graduates working for free in the hope of gaining extra exposure?
Well, working for free in what way?
In magazine editorials or commissions, but not getting paid for it.
It's rough. I think that's rough, but you've got to do it. I mean, you've got to grab every chance. As I've said, it is tough. It's not going to come to you, and it's completely wrong that people should want something for nothing. But if it's a case of if you do it for nothing, or if you want money for it, they won't give it to you, then it's your decision. Personally, I've done a lot of things for nothing, and also you find that people can't pay the full amount, or they can't afford this, or they can't afford that. If it's good exposure and it gets you out there and up there, and also you're an artist, so you're doing it anyway, you might as well do it, unless you've got another thing that you are being paid a huge amount of money for. You might as well do it anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Lizzie, could we have one of your second questions, please?
Yeah, of course. I'm just going to wait for a tractor to go by. Gerald, in the early days of your career, how did you overcome criticism?
Criticism from whom?
From your peers, from those around you, perhaps those
Yeah.
that commissioned you.
Well, of course, you are. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, I can.
You are going to get criticism from your peers because there's a certain amount of jealousy in this world, as you know, and people become jealous, especially if you become successful. You're going to have a lot of criticism. I get criticism for, the things that I draw from various, if I made a drawing the other day of Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, breastfeeding. She was bare on the top half, and she was breastfeeding Spain, Italy, and Greece. All these countries that Germany supports financially, and so I just thought it was a good way of showing how she had to, feed them all. And anyway, I had a thing from 5 Labour MPs, 5 lady Labour MPs, who said, "How dare I show a woman, especially Angela Merkel, breastfeeding? You wouldn't do it to a man." They said, "Well, of course I wouldn't do it to a man because men don't breastfeed, but I know what they mean. They say I wouldn't treat a man like that, but my God, the drawings I do of men with their willies or whatever, it's just silly to say that, but I've said to these women, well, if you're a political figure, then you've got to expect these things. However, so there is that sort of criticism which I've grown used to. The criticism you mean is from people around you say, I don't think that's very good. It's a sad thing. I'm patron of something called Campaign for Drawing, and the idea there is to encourage people who've dropped drawing to take it up again, because it's very therapeutic, if nothing else. And the sad thing is that we're all born with the ability to draw, and if you ask a little child to draw My Holiday or his mum, they've sort of done it in 5 seconds. There's no hang-ups, there's no problem. Later on in life, you're trying to get perspective, you're trying to get a likeness, you're trying to do shading and all these complicated things you've read about and know about. And most people give up at that point because they get criticized and laughed at by their peers. And you've got to develop a thick skin, sod them, carry on and do what you feel like doing. Remember, you've got this terrific job, and unless you want to go and work in an office, which I did when I first started, and promised myself I'd never go back there. You're going to get criticism, and of course, genuinely, people who go into art galleries don't like the paintings they see. You can't expect everyone to like everything. It's just, not, so you're not the only one being criticised. Everybody gets criticised, and nobody likes it really. But you just have to get on with it.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay.
And on the back of that Angela Merkel cartoon, could we go to Italy and Francesco? Could we have your second question?
Yes. What is the best way to set up a very captivating and impressive portfolio? For example, what should I include?
Well, I don't know. the biggest range of your work possible, I would say, and you could say, I can do this, I can do that, I can do the other. But as I said to you previously, make it as simple as possible. Don't get it overcomplicated, because art directors are busy people and they don't want to spend hours looking through dozens and dozens and dozens of sketches. They just want to see one or two that will, no, not one or two, but say sort of a dozen that look great and give the full range of your work. I don't know where you want to go. If you want to go into animation, obviously, you'd have to show that. And in that which case, you'd probably carry a little kind of thing to slot into their computer to show your animation. I mean, of course, as I say, I'm not computer literate, so I wouldn't present my work on a computer, but a lot of people do. I wouldn't. In fact, I don't present my work anymore, so I'm really out of touch. You know, people know what I do,
yeah.
And if they don't, well, can't help it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sophia, would you like to put your second question to Gerald?
Right. Hi. In an interview, you mentioned the effect of the vulnerability of life on your work and how you depicted people as lumps of flesh that are miraculously able to do things and walk about. To what extent has your work been influenced by philosophical viewpoints such as existentialism and/or absurdism?
Well, not directly by reading it or so forth. I think it all starts, in my case, from when I was a child and I was very, very sick, as I say, very asthmatic. And this was back in the days before there were any sophisticated drugs to deal with asthma, which there are now. I take a drug every day for my asthma, which keeps me kind of normal. Asthma is the inability to breathe out. You can breathe in, but the muscles of your chest, when you have an asthma attack, will not expel the air, so you kind of get bigger and bigger and it's more painful. But now there are drugs to relax all of that. However, I mention this because, you know, that was my childhood. I had great sicknesses. I went to school. It was wartime, so I used to travel around with my parents. My father was in the Royal Air Force, and so it was a time of great anxiety. I was a nervous, timid, frightened child, really.
Okay.
I wasn't particularly frightened of the war because my parents hid that from me. But I was very aware of their fear, and their fear, I think, about from all the fears of any parent, was that I was going to die, because if you see anyone with a true asthma attack, it's scary. You think they're not going to be able to draw their next breath. And so I think from an early age I was surrounded by the feeling of mortality, you know, and I don't think my parents thought I would last. Certainly not to the age I'm at now. And so that was kind of the background to my childhood. And then when I grew up and started looking at other artists, I was very attracted to the work of Francis Bacon, Lucien Freud. Francis Bacon always drew, this is probably what you read, me saying that Francis Bacon drew people as meat, really. We are all our meat, you know, this miraculous thing of life which can be snuffed away, you know, as we saw those poor people in the Malaysian airplane. You know, one minute they're happy and going on holiday in an airport, next minute they don't exist. There's something, you know, and we're all aware of that tightrope we're on. So I guess that is the black side of me. There is that black side. And it doesn't come from reading books. It doesn't come from any philosophy that I've studied. It comes from something that we probably all feel to a certain extent inside us. And therefore, you know, and a lot of my work is black and critical and scared, I guess. And I still think the drawings that I do now in the newspaper are about the things in life that scare me, about war and famine and all those things. So that's kind of constantly with me, but I also hope that I have a lighter side, and I think in many ways, as a political cartoonist, it's better to prick someone's pride with making them look a fool than making them look a devil, or making them dripping with fangs and dripping with blood. I think if you can make them look like clowns, which they are, most of them, it's better. And then on the other extent, you know, that I've designed the Nutcracker for the English National Ballet, which is a delightful kind of Tchaikovsky ballet, and I designed that for really with my grandchildren in mind, who, excuse me, who were you know, about 5 at the time when and my effort there was to entertain them, to put as much color on stage as possible. So you know, that's the other side of me. I'd like to think I've got the kind of lighter side, but then you know, I do dip into blackness in my work, and that's another reason I think back in the 60s when I started doing that, there wasn't anybody else around doing that, and that's why I came to prominence.